operations and assaults. Tevel is responsible for cooperation with Allied secret services. Keshet collects information through wiretapping, surveillance, and burglaries. The largest department is Tzomet. It collects information from human sources and maintains a global network of informants. The campaign against Palestinian terrorists begins in October 1972.
Of course, it was revenge, we have to admit it. But
Okay,
it was to
this one
prevent
is coming out,
terror against us.
but this
And
one
to
is really
prevent
good
terror,
and
you
like
have to
it.
take
So
all the
I'm
measures
going to
which are
still use
in
it.
your hands. And you have to do it in a very clever means to do such a thing that they will not be able to ask you, what are you doing here?
The killings are intended as a visible warning. Leading PLO members react by seeking refuge in Arab countries. As a consequence, Mossad extends its death list by adding targets in Western Europe, where Israeli agents can move freely. Student leader Abdallah al-Franji is said to be in touch with the assassins from Munich.
Abdallah Franji, I remember him, the name, he was a student and he was one of our targets.
Yet he's arrested by the German police, along with hundreds of other Arabs, and awaits expulsion, since after the massacre in Munich, the authorities have decided on a tough stance.
And the fact that he was in jail, it saved his life, if I may say so.
Al-Franji moves to Algeria to coordinate the PLO's European sections from a remote position. Yet Mossad is hot on his tail.
My friend, the PLO representative there, was holding a thick envelope, and I said, Abu Khalil, please don't open it.
Bitte mach das nicht auf.
He said, you're serious?
Und dann hat das aufgemacht.
And then he opened it.
Ich bin geschleudert
I was thrown about 6 meters across the room.
und der hat die Finger
All his fingers were gone on both hands, and an eye too.
sofort. Ich habe wirklich Glück gehabt, dass ich
I was really lucky I wasn't severely injured like my friends,
meine Freunde
and that I wasn't killed.
auch nicht das Leben verloren habe.
Within a year, Mossad kills 14 Palestinians. The Kidon assassinations are considered a success, until an operation in Lillehammer, Norway. In July 1973, there's a fatal mix-up. Israeli agents mistakenly kill a Moroccan waiter they took for Ali Hassan Salameh, the alleged mastermind of the Munich attack. What's even worse, the agents are caught by the Norwegian police. All over Europe, communication channels and agents' hideouts are blown. A disaster for the Secret Service. The vendetta against the PLO comes to a preliminary end. The PLO leaders decide to focus their attacks on the occupied territories. Terrorist attacks in the West harm their image. But not everybody sticks to the directive. Assaults and hostage-taking in Europe continue, so Mossad is hot on its enemies' tails again.
We had to continue, and we continue. We do things that we did things that were published in the public, and we did things which are not public.
1987. Almost 2 decades have passed, during which Israel had proved unable to quell Palestinian violence. On the contrary, after 20 years of Israeli occupation, the fury about any lack of perspective boils over in the West Bank and the Gaza Strip. The so-called Intifada, the uprising of the people on the streets, catches Israel unawares. Operations against the PLO are still focused on foreign countries where its leaders are in hiding, a classic domain of Mossad. In Tunis, its agents and the Israeli military liquidate the alleged mastermind behind the uprisings. Arafat's second-in-command, Abu Jihad. However, it becomes ever more evident that it's not the PLO in faraway Tunis which calls the shots. Striking at them doesn't end the Intifada. In Israel, demands for a diplomatic solution are growing louder. In 1993, Israelis and Palestinians finally meet on neutral ground in Oslo to negotiate peace proposals after decades of mutual killing. However, Israel's secret services are left out in the cold. It's the express decision of Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin.
The other one is too dark.
At Mossad, they feel snubbed. Its top brass only learn of the Oslo talks via their own channels of information.
The head of Mossad rushed over to Rabin and told him, "Sir, something's going on in Europe." Rabin's answer was, "Drop it, I'm aware of it," without sharing, without telling him what was going on. Peres used to say, "What do intelligence services know? What did they know about Munich? What did they know about Pearl Harbor?" Therefore, he thought he could do without their advice.
Rabin concludes an agreement with the Palestinians. The West Bank and the Gaza Strip are returned to Palestinian autonomy. In turn, the PLO agrees to stop the attacks on Israel. Yet the PLO is no longer the sole player when it comes to keeping the peace. A new radical force has gained in strength, the Islamic terror organization Hamas. Their goal, a theocracy and the destruction of Israel. Imprisoning its founder, Sheikh Ahmad Yassin, hasn't weakened Hamas. In Israel, the hopes for peace now rest on the deal with the PLO.
The main approach was that the Hamas is a problem, but as long as Yasser Arafat and the Palestinian Authority want to continue and see an interest in continuing the peace process, then take care of the Hamas.
A fatal error. Hamas's suicide attacks stun Israel's cities. The Islamists want to undermine the peace process. Mossad has no remedy for dealing with a new threat of fanatic suicide attackers. Israel's new Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, in office since 1996, is expected by supporters to return to a policy of strength.
As Prime Minister, it's my responsibility to do everything in my power to fight this terrorist evil.
The Prime Minister asked the leaders of the intelligence services to name persons they could target and liquidate to stop Hamas attacks. But the leaders of Hamas were in Amman, Jordan, and we couldn't get near them.
As there is peace between Israel and Jordan, Mossad has largely retreated from the territory of its neighbor so as not to endanger the mutual relations. But Mossad is under pressure. It must produce results against Hamas and stop the suicide attacks, no matter how. In the summer of 1997, Mossad agents draw up a list of potential Hamas targets, among them its leaders in Jordan.
Benjamin Netanyahu compelled the Mossad to carry out an act in Jordan, and the Mossad didn't want to do it, and Netanyahu pressured the Mossad. Sometimes politicians need to show the public some results. And then the easiest outlet is the Mossad or the IDF, the Israeli military.
Netanyahu wants to strike at the heart of Hamas. Khaled Mashal Hamas's Politburo chief in Amman becomes the first target. Nothing should suggest an Israeli strike. Jordan's government fears Palestinian uprisings in the refugee camps. The idea is to poison Mashal in broad daylight, but without anyone realizing it, so it will look like he died of natural causes.
The unit experimented on unsuspecting people on the street. Two people approach the target from behind. One sprays him, and the other, just before, shakes and opens a cola can, causing the can's contents to spray all over. When the person who was sprayed turns around, just sees a shaken up can of cola, he thinks that's what sprayed him.
The team has little time to practice. Netanyahu wants quick results. The operation spirals out of control. The agents run into Mashal unexpectedly. He's in the company of his children and a bodyguard. Nevertheless, they proceed with their scheme. Their escape, however, fails. They're apprehended by Mashal's bodyguard. Mashal is in mortal agony. Two Mossad agents are exposed and end up in custody. Jordan's King Hussein is appalled.
من التأكيد
Now it's time to do our
على
eyes.
أنه هكذا أساليب لا يمكن أن تقبل.
Hussein said that if Mashal dies, he'll have a Palestinian uprising on his hands, and he'll have no choice but to execute our two operatives. So they decided to make a deal with Hussein. We'd save Mashal's life using the antidote, and the two captured agents would be released.
Grudgingly, Israel consents to save the terrorist's life. Nevertheless, diplomatic relations with Jordan are severely disrupted. Israel pays a high price for peace. Hamas founder Sheikh Rassim is released from prison, a concession to Jordan intended to appease the Palestinians living there. Khalid Mashal becomes Hamas's new leader in waiting. The attacks in Israel continue.
Should I do blush
In
right
September
now?
2000, the Islamists
No, let me do
unleashed
the
the
eyes.
Second Intifada.
Can do anything. It's my face.
The number of suicide bombers rises.
Mossad, Israeli military intelligence, and Shin Bet were suffering, I think, the lowest ebb of their history. They were not capable to deal with the threat.
Brother, I can still go with
The Amman fiasco plunges Mossad into its biggest crisis yet. However, there's a new threat that offers the opportunity to brush up the tarnished image. Iran. To its mothers, Israel is Satan incarnate. That's why they are excluded from any peace initiatives.
They were basically saying, okay, if we're not going to be part of this process, don't expect us to support it, and don't be surprised if we undermine it. And that's basically what they did.
Iran sets up a network among Israel's enemies. It
So today
maintains
I'm
close
going
contact with
in
Bashar
all
al-Assad's
shades of
regime in
shame.
Syria. It supports the Shiite Hezbollah
my
militia
eyes.
in Lebanon with arms, money, and fighters.
So, I'll be
Yet also the
using
hostile
this
Sunni Islamists in the
full
occupied
of
territories
shame.
receive aid from Tehran.
shade. Brush.
In 2002, Meir Dagan becomes the new head of Mossad. To him, the main adversary is Iran.
And it's powered down.
Meir Dagan was characterized as a more robust director of the Mossad and was often seen as giving back tips to the Mossad.
When Meir Dagan takes office, Mossad analysts estimate that Iran could possess nuclear weapons within a few years. A mortal danger. For decades, Israel has been fighting every nuclear ambition among
I'm
its
thinking
neighbors.
this pink.
Mossad is ordered to stop the Iranians' nuclear program. Cyber sabotage has opened up new possibilities. to strike without contact and to achieve maximum damage at minimal risk. A computer virus cripples Iran's uranium enrichment plant, Stuxnet. Presumably as a result of covert collaboration between the CIA and Mossad. In addition to the digital possibilities, Mossad also uses an age-old method. 6 scientists working on Iran's nuclear program are liquidated. Israel buys time, and Mossad finally can boast another triumph. The program is delayed by years, a definite success for Mossad. There's progress in the war against terror too, yet it comes at a price. Israel immures itself. More than 700 kilometers of concrete and fences are raised to keep assassins out. And indeed, the number of assaults diminishes. At the same time, Mossad agents continue to liquidate high-ranking terrorists.
You don't kill unrelated people, you kill your adversaries, your enemies, because by killing them you're saving the lives of others. That's the rule.
A view that is highly controversial, even in Israel. No other Western country has ordered more extrajudicial killings since the end of World War II.
Intelligence organizations can be quite effective in combating terrorism. But the problem is that they don't solve the problem. The problem is political, economic, societal, cultural, education. And you have to deal with the sources of the problem. Otherwise, it will always be a war between intelligence organizations and terrorists.
It's a war Mossad can't win. Mossad has achieved mythical status by spectacular operations. There are new threats, however, which can't be countered by relying on past success.
A vicious militant is systematically targeting innocent civilians.
The guy was so brutal. If you kill everybody else, eventually people stand back and say, whoa, we got a big guy.
An elite group of special forces are hand-picked from across the world to take the terrorists out.
You do a series of raids that is devastating.
They're led by a maverick general with radical new methods.
If you hit an organization repeatedly enough, you could actually cause them to collapse.
It's a race against time. They must stop it before more blood is shed.
Nothing's routine if there's bias and risk.
Iraq, April 2006. In the dead of night, a helicopter lifts off from a desert airbase. On board is a group of elite soldiers from a secretive unit, codenamed Task Force Black.
On the way to a mission, I'm often asked, were you nervous? You don't have time to be nervous because there's so many things happening. Like everyone is busy.
They are bound for a house in an area known as the Triangle of Death. Their mission is to arrest a senior member of the deadly terror group, Al-Qaeda, in Iraq.
You should always be expecting the worst. What if we get fire upon? What if the fast rover's in the wrong spot? What if we get around and the helicopter is downed outside the compound?
Their targets are ready to resist with extreme violence.
almost as soon as they were through the door, they were hit by a hail of bullets. The people inside clearly knew somebody was coming, they were armed and they were waiting.
The team quickly kill the first militant and move in to clear the rest of the building.
There were half a dozen assault rifles. There were dozens of hand grenades. There were at least 2, possibly 3, wearing suicide vests.
And at the top of the staircase, one of the suicide bombers steps out of the shadows and detonates his vest. By now, the militants are fighting with everything they have.
You know, Islam surprises me. Why would you go to attack people,
Soldiers
kill
task
them,
force
and you
are
also
accustomed
killing
to this
yourself?
kind of brutal violence. They face it on a daily basis.
I've never understood that.
It will do whatever it takes
You
to.
go kill people and you kill yourself.
The special forces don't realize it.
What
This
kind
house
of
holds the key
self-hatred
to
is
finding
that?
the most wanted man in the
The
Middle
greatest
East.
commandment is to love yourself
One
and
of
to
their
love
captors
others and to
tonight
love God.
will lead them to Abu Musab
Why would you
al-Zarqawi,
kill
the
yourself?
leader of Al-Qaeda in Iraq.
Like these Muslim groups,
He has
Al-Qaeda,
murdered thousands of innocent civilians and spread terror throughout the region. His campaign of violence is so effective, the US has created a Black Ops task force with just one mission: taking al-Zarqawi down.
This was a guy who had murdered thousands of people. In fact, he murdered many more people than Osama bin Laden ever did.
To understand how al-Zarqawi rose to become one of the most feared terrorists on the planet, we must look to the town of Zarqa, Jordan, 500 miles to the west of Baghdad. Al-Zarqawi was born here in 1966.
Zarqawi's background is he was a criminal. You know, he spent time in a Jordanian prison for sexual assault. He was a drug dealer.
something else I saw.
He was a petty criminal in Jordan.
The accounts differ as to whether he was actually a
Seems
sort of
like this-
hard
that
boozing villain
thing
in his
actually used
hometown.
at that
But it's certainly true that he was involved in some forms of crime,
contrast.
and that he probably had some kind of epiphany, some kind of moment when he realised that his life was going the wrong way, and that Islam was the answer for him.
In 1989, al-Zarqawi travels to Afghanistan to become a freedom fighter against the Soviet occupation. It is here that he meets his mentor and inspiration, Osama bin Laden.
He had come up during the course of the war in Afghanistan. People understood his importance as an operational leader, and he was clearly trusted by bin Laden and the Al-Qaeda senior leadership. He was well liked by the soldiers in Al-Qaeda. He was well respected by the leadership. He was incredibly capable. He was experienced.
Over the next 15 years, partly with bin Laden's support, al-Zarqawi grows to become an accomplished terrorist. By 2003, he is in Iraq, fighting against the American-led invasion. The early months of the war appear to be a swift and stunning victory as the old regime melts away. But al-Zarqawi is waiting in the shadows to start a new campaign of violence.
When he was deployed into Iraq, we understood as the American counterterrorism community that this was a significant event. He had that unique combination of skills that would allow him to be a real force for Al-Qaeda against us inside Iraq.
In the months that follow Saddam's overthrow, chaos envelops the country. Al-Zarqawi takes full advantage of this, actively working to stir up the hatred between Iraq's two main religious groups, the majority Shia Muslims and the minority Sunnis. He creates a militant group with the aim of killing as many Shias as possible, thus sparking retaliations and creating a brutal cycle of violence. It is called Al-Qaeda in Iraq, or AQI.
We mistakenly look at these organizations as terrorist groups. This is too narrow. These are revolutionary organizations that want to spread an idea. They don't want to just spread weapons or explode suicide. The idea is they could return to what they call a caliphate, a 14 centuries old concept that there's a pure way to live according to the Quran and the Prophet Muhammad. So the idea is, where can you find a springboard to do this? Afghanistan, Pakistan, and then you get Iraq.
The militant Islamists were prepared to do pretty much anything. And of course, quite soon they discovered that bombing things like the UN offices in Baghdad, the International Committee of the Red Cross offices, and then moving on to targets like markets, queues outside police stations where the police were recruiting, all those sort of things, were actually far easier targets than American convoys or American bases, where the T-walls had gone up. The base represented a hard concrete face to the world, and you know, yes, if you drove a truck up, you might kill the guy on the gate who was checking passes, but you were unlikely to achieve a major result.
Al-Zarqawi orchestrates numerous suicide bombings. A devastating series of attacks in March 2004 kills close to 200 people at Shia holy sites.
So they shifted their targeting towards the sort of softer targets that could yield more spectacular results. And of course, soon they were killing dozens, scores, maybe even sometimes over 100 people in a single complex attack.
On the 11th of May 2004, Al-Zarqawi is linked to a new outrage. A video of an American hostage appears on a jihadist website. The American, deliberately dressed in a Guantanamo Bay style orange jumpsuit, is Nick Berg, a 26-year-old communications engineer from Pennsylvania. Berg was kidnapped in Iraq a month previously, and the video shows his unimaginably horrific death.
The video is one of those horror show type of jihadist videos in which a long knife is used to cut his throat, and you can even hear the sound of knife on bone. The screams. It's a truly horrific video. But the point is, at the beginning of the video, in the original form it was released, it says Abu Musab al-Zarqawi slaughters an American.
The CIA determines that Al-Zarqawi himself is the hooded man wielding the knife.
The guy was so brutal, so tough. It's sort of like a mafia family operating in New York City. If you kill everybody else, eventually people stand back and say, whoa, we got a big guy, a big dog on the corner in town, and we better be careful.
Zarqawi could see that if he publicized himself and what he was doing as a really militant, irreconcilable enemy of the Americans, that this would bring him money from the collections in mosques for the jihad. It would bring him volunteers from across the Arab world, and in that calculation, he was right.
He really put the crosshairs on his own head by all these spectacular acts and all the press that he was receiving.
So just the brutality and the effectiveness of his efforts against first the Americans and then the locals, I think people stood back and say, this guy's a blowtorch. We better let him roll.
What the Iraqi Sunnis started to believe, and those people who had joined Al-Qaeda, was that if the Americans can't kill Abu Musab al-Zarqawi, can't stop him, then maybe he was predestined to win the war.
Berg's death is a signal to the world that Al-Zarqawi's reign of terror is escalating out of control. But secretly, the US is planning a series of black ops designed to bring him crashing down. In Washington, ending Al-Zarqawi's reign of terror has become a top priority for President Bush and his inner circle of advisors.
You come in, and the days where the momentum, you feel like the momentum hasn't been with you, you start with, your thought is really so simple. It's let nothing blow up today. Let me get through today with nothing blowing up.
It wasn't that we were losing, it was just like, when will this end, and how will it end?
Al-Zarqawi seems to have the power to strike at will, and yet somehow he remains completely hidden.
We really didn't know what he was doing in Iraq, and we didn't know, like, did he have wives there? Did he have kids there? Where was he moving? What was his support network?
what most counterterrorism officials will tell you is you go through periods where you feel beleaguered, right? You go through periods where you're making very limited progress and you're trying to understand why that is. Why does he seem to have momentum behind him? And you're trying to figure out what can I do to change that dynamic. But anybody who's been in this fight will tell you that's what happens. You go through these periods and you've got to push through it. You've got to understand what is it that's giving him the momentum and how do you take that away from him.
No one even has a recent photo of al-Zarqawi, let alone any idea where he is. He doesn't use a mobile phone, for fear it will be tracked. He only meets with a select group of trusted advisors, whose own whereabouts are unknown.
He really was kind of a ghost for a long time. And you would get bits and pieces here, but usually by the time you got them, they were outdated.
In September 2003, a new general arrives in Iraq. His name is Stanley McChrystal. He has radical new ideas for hunting down al-Zarqawi and destroying AQI.
General McChrystal is one of the most dedicated individuals I've ever met. He is a driven warrior. He artfully looked at where he could make the most impact.
Stan McChrystal, unique guy. Years of experience with our Special Operations Forces at all levels, former Ranger commander. You get personalities that are that strong, that experienced, that well respected. The force falls in, and their operational experience starts to show. And it's just the type of guy you want in that position.
McChrystal is the newly appointed commander of the Joint Special Operations Command, or JSOC.
And certainly in every conflict, the JSOC has been there. They were in Grenada, they were in Panama, Gulf War, Gulf II, Kosovo. Pretty much where there's a conflict, you can depend that JSOC has been there first, and they're always the last to leave.
Formed in the late 1980s to coordinate the work of America's elite troops, JSOC controls the best of the best from across the US military. These are the so-called Special Mission Units, Navy SEAL Team 6, Army Delta Force, and the Air Force 24th Special Tactics Squadron, active in every corner of the world, often on highly classified missions. The men of JSOC are experts in precise, targeted strikes against hard-to-reach enemies.
It was a very secret organization, and it was tasked with fighting the most sensitive types of mission against US enemies, obviously in the context post 9/11, terrorist enemies, counter-terrorism.
At the start of the war, JSOC's mission had been to find and arrest the leaders of the old Iraqi regime.
I'm usually conflicted on
famously depicted on a deck of cards, with Saddam Hussein as the ace of spades.
Ladies and gentlemen, we got him.
Within a year, even Saddam himself is in custody. But this creates a power vacuum, and al-Zarqawi is ready and waiting to step into the breach.
In decapitating what some call the Ba'athist or nationalist leadership, they probably assisted the growth of al-Qaeda in Iraq, because by taking away the leadership figures, the sheikhs, the former generals, the key people, the key Ba'athists, they left quite a lot of angry, young, militant Sunnis with nowhere to go.
McChrystal takes a strategic decision to abandon the hunt for ex-members of the old Saddam regime. Instead, he will focus almost all of his resources on just one man, Abu Musab al-Zarqawi.
Our commander gave us a big speech. The point of the speech was the only way to win the Iraq War and to stop the violence between Sunni and Shia is to find and kill or capture Abu Musab al-Zarqawi.
To get to al-Zarqawi himself, McChrystal knows he needs to build a complete picture of his terror network, AQI. He sets up a large command center at an old Iraqi airbase in the town of Balad, north of Baghdad.
Then he invites all of America's many competing spy agencies to set up camp there. From now on, interagency turf wars are banned, and everything will be shared.
When we started working with Special Forces, and I remember General McChrystal, who's a real hero in this war, I remember him coming into CIA headquarters and saying, you know, we need some of your people. And as any bureaucrat will, you sit back there and say, all right, is this dog gonna hunt? What are we trying to do here?
The idea is that every piece of information, however insignificant, will be brought here and fed into a massive database. If McChrystal and his men learn everything they can about AQI, they may be able to quickly find its weakest points and strike.
Senior leadership understood that in order to win a counterinsurgency, you could not win it by being on the defensive. You had to go on the offensive.
You would be shocked at, one, the focus on the targets. These are the top 10. Here are the intel collection tasks. This is how we're moving against them. And as information breaks on each one, you see the various forces and the interagency and the allies, and in some cases the Iraqis, move against that. And it's an unfolding story every day. It's constantly updated. It never blinks. It never sleeps.
A key part of the plan is to pump each captured militant for as much intelligence as possible. So McChrystal sets up a special detention facility right next door to his command center.
The interrogation unit essentially composed of where we kept the prisoners and also our interrogation rooms, and then our analysis room and our desks, which we called the Gator Pit. Part of our facility was, you know, an old Saddam era aircraft hangar, and then the rest of it was just kind of like makeshift built additions to a warehouse, essentially.
Using his huge store of the most up-to-date intelligence, McChrystal unleashes the most dangerous weapon in JSOC's arsenal: the special mission units of elite frontline soldiers. These men will also work in an entirely new way. Historically, they ran only 1 or 2 major operations per year. Now they will conduct multiple raids on a daily basis.
I can remember visiting Iraq and watching them. They didn't go out once on a night. They went out multiple times. Oftentimes, the intelligence operators would go with the special forces.
It all starts by piling in the back of a Stryker vehicle and sitting in a very cramped space that's very hot and very dark. And then you're going through the streets, you know, and there's all types of hazards, roadside bombs and snipers. And by the time, you know, you get to the target, you're usually already like drenched in sweat, and your adrenaline's going.
You're fired up. You have your game face on. You need to be intense because intensity and momentum are critical. You know, as far as winning the day. Nervous? Not really nervous.
You're jumping out of the vehicle, you're running down the street. When it gets really exciting is when you have more than one house. Oftentimes, these terrorists, they would run out of one house and jump a wall and into another house. Then you'd have to raid a second house, and then sometimes that would end up with a third or fourth house.
The critical factor is speed. Every time a militant is captured, the members of AQI around him will try to cover their tracks by reorganizing the entire network.
You had information that would perish. It was time sensitive. That sometimes needed to be run down to the ground, and maybe that would be the only chance of preventing a catastrophe or an act that would kill, you know, a U.S. soldier or our ally.
It's a cat and mouse game. The terrorists constantly change their routines, abandon safe houses, and recruit new men to replace those that have been lost. But if McChrystal's people can work faster than their enemy, they will destroy AQI before it can regenerate.
You take technical information, things like stuff you get off a captured cell phone or a captured hard drive. You take detainee operation, what detainees are saying about the network they just came from, and you put them in a big hopper and say, our software, our analysis, our people have to be good enough so they can put together a picture of what that network looks like. And not only put that picture together, do it well enough so that an operator can conduct a raid within 24 hours. You're doing it for years on end with people from every agency in town. Incredible.
In a way, the most important idea that General McChrystal and JSOC brought to this whole thing was that if you hit an organization fast enough, accurately enough, and repeatedly enough, you could actually cause them to collapse.
JSOC soon develops into a well-oiled machine. Every night, 4 Black Ops task forces spread out through Iraq, performing up to a dozen raids at one time.
I have a huge problem. I feel like
each group is assigned to take down targets in a different part of US-occupied territory. To the north is Task Force Red, formed from the Army's 75th Rangers Brigade. To the west, Task Force Blue, made up of US Navy SEALs. The center of Iraq will be the responsibility of Task Force Green, staffed by the US Army's most elite unit, Delta Force. These soldiers are joined by a team of elite troops from Britain's Special Air Service, the SAS, operating under the codename Task Force Black.
Hey, Mon.
The SAS are the pioneers in the art of black ops, such as this daring hostage rescue from the Iranian embassy in the heart of London in 1980. In particular, they are masters of surveillance and intelligence gathering.
There was undoubtedly a feeling among many of the American intelligence operators that the SAS and the other British Special Forces had skills that were quite unusual and quite different to the type of skills that Delta Force or the SEALs had. The American training and operational activity had all been based around, if you like, action man, leaping out of helicopters, boarding ships, all this kind of stuff, assault roles. Whereas the British Special Forces, because of their long involvement, not just in Northern Ireland, but in places like the Balkans, where they've been involved in the hunt for war criminals, they had skills to do with the patient nurturing of targets and groups of targets. Now that involved surveillance, it involved creativity, stealth, about how, for example, could you get a remote surveillance camera onto a balcony overlooking a target you might be interested in. They came up with all sorts of things. They drove around in Baghdad taxis, they disguised themselves. And the American intelligence people saw some of this during the early years.
I'm Miss Kinoti, I'm from Kenya.
McChrystal and his team work through their targets, night after night. The supply lines of foreign fighters are intercepted. Bomb makers
so weird to
are taken out of action.
like that.
Mountains of intelligence are captured and analyzed.
They would do a raid, they would get what's called pocket litter or hard drives, you know, pieces of paper out of people's pockets. They'd come back, they'd bring it to analysts back on the base from the CIA who would go through that information. That would lead to another targeting package, and the special forces would go out again. That sort of continuous feed, continuous loop, is what made them incredibly effective.
Despite 2 years of taking al-Zarqawi's network apart, the ultimate objective, the man himself, still eludes them. But the task force is about to find a crucial breakthrough, one that could finally stop al-Zarqawi for good. Strike teams from JSOC, the US Joint Special Operations Command, are staging multiple raids across Iraq every night. This secretive organization joins together elite special forces from across the US military and its allies.
I should wear lashes today.
They are under the command of a single leader, General Stanley McChrystal. By the start of 2006, their system of rapid-fire raids and sophisticated intelligence gathering is beginning to pull apart the terror network known as AQI.
They're also getting ever closer to its feared leader, Abu Musab al-Zarqawi.
I'm going to target each discrete, tiny little element. And if I can begin to pull little elements away, suddenly the whole thing falls of its own weight.
Whenever they get close to al-Zarqawi, he seems once again to slip through their grasp. Yet, he still retains the ability to perpetrate devastating attacks, especially against so-called soft targets, like Shia mosques, killing hundreds at once. In April 2006, al-Zarqawi releases a video which, for the first time in years, shows his face.
The fact that he was a charismatic military and tactical leader led to this larger-than-life sort of myth about him. I think it fed his ego as well. He kind of began believing his own press, if you will.
You had little kids in the street, pretending to be Abu Musab al-Zarqawi because he was essentially invincible.
The video urges al-Zarqawi's supporters to show no mercy against their so-called enemies, Iraq's Shia community and the US forces. Just as that video hits the airwaves, one element of the JSOC task force is preparing the latest in their long series of nightly raids. It's a team from the British SAS, operating under the codename Task Force Black. They are now concentrating on an area to the south of the capital. It is a militant heartland, and the soldiers call it the Triangle of Death.
The British Special Operations Task Force conducted a series of operations in the Triangle of Death in early 2006. And they planned an operation in April 2006, which they called Larchwood Fall.
Operation Larchwood Fall is a dangerous and daring raid to arrest a mid-ranking al-Zarqawi henchman, codenamed Abu Haidar. McChrystal's intelligence machine has pinpointed him to a safe house in the town of Yusufia.
We put surveillance on that safe house, and we watched it continuously for, I think, almost a month. And then one day, we see this meeting happening there. These cars converge. And so we quickly sent a raid team to go out and capture the members in that safe house.
The team know that houses like this are often well defended with heavily armed men, some wearing suicide vests. But the house could also contain a number of innocent civilians.
If they're a threat, then you engage. If they're not a threat, then you don't. You have to be able to make that decision in a snap. That's what Special Operations trains for. That's what they're really, really good at.
And just after 2 a.m., Task Force Black sets off in their helicopters for the target house. Following them is a support group from the British Parachute Regiment, the Paras. They will form a cordon around the house to prevent reinforcements arriving and arrest so-called squirters, targets trying to make a run for it. A short flight of just 20 minutes puts them within range of the house.
The SAS men realised it was not going to be a typical sort of mission. They thought they could hear sounds inside the building. They approached very gingerly. And to their surprise and satisfaction, found that there was a door just wide open. Almost as soon as they were through the door, they were hit by a hail of bullets. These people were heavily armed, and they were prepared to fight to the death in order to prevent the SAS from getting in and taking their man.
The team quickly withdraws to a safe distance. They must decide whether or not to resume their attack.
Some of these incidents where heavy resistance was encountered, they simply pulled back and dropped a bomb on the building and killed everybody inside. For many different reasons, the SAS commander on the ground decided not to do that. They wanted this person alive for intelligence purposes. They felt it was worth trying to fight their way in, and that's what they did.
Your raid compounds, the objective is to keep the opposition on the run and keep him on the defensive.
The team encounter their worst nightmare. A suicide bomber.
As one of the SAS men went up the stairs, he detonated. The SAS man was blown down the stairs. Fortunately for him, he wasn't seriously wounded. He had cuts and bruises, but of course the suicide bomber had blown himself up.
Meanwhile, outside the house, more militants join the fight. They rain fire down on the special forces.
Another man wearing a suicide vest, a squirter, fled out the back of the building and hid under a car.
The outer cordon of paratroopers enters the fight. Taking out the two militants firing from the roof, they turn their attention to the suicide bomber hiding under the car, shooting him dead before he can detonate his vest.
So at the end of a sort of terrifying 20 minutes, there were a whole lot of dead people.
Inside the house, we captured 5 senior-ranking members of Al-Qaeda.
The operation is considered another successful day at the office for Task Force Black. The main target of the raid, Abu Haida, is in custody, along with 4 other detainees. In addition, a treasure trove of intelligence is recovered from the house.
They sweep everything up they think might be of relevance. Mobile phones, computers, everything else, and they take it away. As a result of Lotchwood 4 and subsequent operations that it generated, a huge amount of actionable intelligence came into JSOC's hands.
When a JSOC analyst starts to probe one of the captured computers, he discovers something extraordinary. Raw footage of al-Zarqawi himself from his recent propaganda video.
Through traces of DNA that were found on it when it was sent back to the US for analysis, they would conclude it was his laptop.
The analysts realize that al-Zarqawi must have left the house just hours before the SAS arrived.
We actually started to get excited that we were close because Zarqawi was in that house the day before we raided it. And that's when we finally had the confidence to think that we were hot on his trail.
They had narrowly missed their target, but the net is closing in fast. By the spring of 2006, the hunt for Abu Musab al-Zarqawi, the leader of Al-Qaeda in Iraq, has reached a turning point. An elite assault team from the Joint Special Operations Command, JSOC, has secured a major breakthrough following a daring raid on the terrorist's safe house.
The momentum had shifted. The raids of his network were getting faster and closer to him, and so you had the sense, we're going to get there.
As well as capturing several senior members of Al-Qaeda in the raid, JSOC soldiers discover a video of enemy number 1, al-Zarqawi. Hoping to tarnish his fearsome reputation, the coalition releases the full, unedited video to the media. It contains the familiar footage of the terrorist leader parading through the desert, confidently firing a machine gun. But it also shows another side to al-Zarqawi, a slightly overweight, unimpressive figure of a man.
Here's Zarqawi, the ultimate warrior, trying to shoot his machine gun. It's supposed to be automatic fire. He's shooting single shots.
No sooner does he figure out how to switch his weapon to fully automatic, when it jams, and the self-styled holy warrior can't get it going again.
He looks down, can't figure it out. calls his friend to come block the stoppage and get the weapon firing again.
He also appears to be going into battle wearing a nice pair of white trainers. Hardly the image of a man threatening the might of America.
It makes you wonder.
Meanwhile, deep inside JSOC's secret detention center, the task force's interrogators get to work on their captives.
The men that we brought in, we called the Group of Five, and we knew that there were 5 important members of Al-Qaeda, but we didn't know what their roles were. And they had this very unbelievable story that they were there to attend a wedding, even though there was no bride or groom, and there were suicide bombers in the house. And little by little, we would get information from one of them, and then we would take that and turn around and use it against the other 4.
One member of the group, the senior AQI operative known as Abu Haider, refuses to say anything.
He was interrogated for about 20 days. And during that time, he just maintained this story that he was just there to videotape a wedding, even though it was completely unbelievable.
For weeks, rotating teams of interrogators try psychological pressure, pleas for cooperation, subtle threats, and subtle promises. Eventually, they decide he will not talk and arrange to have him sent to Iraq's main detention facility, Abu Ghraib prison.
I decided that I would go and interrogate him one last time before he left. And I didn't really have permission to do that, but I felt that he could provide very important information towards finding Zarqawi. And that conversation started with nothing about Al-Qaeda and nothing about terrorism. It just started with a friendly conversation about who he was, what was his life story, how did he come to be sitting in a chair opposite me, and getting to know each other.
Over the course of 5.5 hours, Matthew Alexander discovers Abu Haider has a fatal weakness: his arrogance. He believes he has beaten the mighty American machine and should be recognized for it. Alexander obliges him.
I would constantly stroke his ego, constantly make him believe in this fallacy that Ants had, that he was a very important man, that he could affect the future of Iraq. And then, in the last 15 minutes, what I did was essentially offer him a deal. I offered him the chance to work with us instead of Al-Qaeda in a secret program that didn't exist, in which he could be a person who could influence the future of Iraq. And he decided to work with me.
Over the next few weeks, Alexander visits Abu Haider in his cell at night and coaxes more and more information out of him about al-Zarqawi's whereabouts. All on the pretext of proving his worth for the non-existent secret program.
I said, you're so close to getting this program. All we need is that one last piece of information that'll convince my bosses. And he said every month Zarqawi would meet with his spiritual advisor, who was our detainee's best friend.
It's the piece of intelligence that everyone has been waiting for. For years, al-Zarqawi has been a ghost, striking with impunity. Now, at last, JSOC has what it needs to find him and take him out.
The intelligence and military effort that had been put together was beginning to close the noose around his neck. We knew that Zarqawi had a spiritual advisor. We knew that he was going to visit him. It was just a matter of being patient.
Using this information, JSOC quickly traces the spiritual advisor and begins following him day and night. Using high-tech systems like Predator drones, as well as old-fashioned undercover operatives, they create what McChrystal calls the unblinking eye. Their target is never out of sight. Abu Haider tells Alexander that if they want to find al-Zarqawi, they need to look for one particular sign.
We would know when he was going to meet with Zarqawi because he would change cars from a white car to a blue car. And whenever he got in this blue car, that meant he was going to meet Zarqawi.
Once again, it was a joint US-UK surveillance on a building in Baghdad. Lo and behold, they realised by following his movements that every few days this man got into his car. They used Predator and other methods to follow his car as it went up the road. to this place in the palm groves near Tikrit, where indeed Abu Musab al-Zarqawi himself was hiding.
By now, pictures from the drone are being fed live to JSOC's command center. Everyone, including General McChrystal himself, is watching in silence as al-Zarqawi's spiritual advisor gets out of the car. Then, Abu Musab al-Zarqawi himself appears.
Once the blue car arrived at the house, helicopters took off immediately to go to that house and capture Zarqawi. And it was about 20 minutes away.
A discussion is held in the command center. Is it worth trying to capture al-Zarqawi alive in broad daylight? Is it better to wait until nightfall and take him when he's asleep? If they strike now, they risk a heavy firefight and numerous casualties. Worse, al-Zarqawi is a master of the last-minute escape. If they wait, he could easily slip through the net again. This could be their one and only chance to finish the job.
And there was a period of time in which we were just waiting. I was watching it live on video, and we were just waiting.
McChrystal believes there is no time to lose. He can't even wait 20 minutes for the assault force to arrive by helicopter. He opts for another plan, designed to take al-Zarqawi completely by surprise. He calls up 2 F-16 fighters patrolling nearby.
We were expecting to watch the helicopters land in the raid, which we typically would watch. And instead, after about maybe a 5-minute wait, the house just exploded.
They knew he was in the building, and they made the decision without losing any time to prosecute the target. So they didn't even feel there was time to get one of their special ops task forces in the air to go and raid the building. They simply decided to hit it with bombs from an F-16, which is what they did.
Just minutes after the bombing, special forces arrive at the house. Incredibly, they find al-Zarqawi still alive in the wreckage.
A soldier grabbed him, and then Zarqawi died. And it was sort of a sweet justice, if you will, that Zarqawi's last image was a U.S. soldier grabbing him.
The day following the raid, the U.S. announces to the world that they have their man at last.
Good morning. Now Zarqawi has met his end. And this violent man will never murder again.
Pictures are released of his dead body as grim confirmation.
Zarqawi could be responsible for upwards of almost 100,000 deaths by starting a civil war in Iraq. And so I don't think the world's going to miss him.
It's a devastating blow to Al-Qaeda in Iraq. The man who was thought to be invincible is dead. But the work is not over. With the intelligence that was collected from the smouldering remains of al-Zarqawi's compound, another series of raids is launched. And AQI starts to fall like a stack of dominoes.
There was, a good deal of chaos inside the organization. And what you do is, when you're targeting Zarqawi, you're also collecting intelligence on the network. And so what that allows you to do is the minute he's dead, they're far more vulnerable, the people around him, than they realize.
Killing him undoubtedly had an impact. There was a lot of exploitation from the raid. A lot of material was recovered. And we can see that little by little, through 2006, through to the early part of 2007, they did successfully take them down. So Zarqawi, if you like, was evidence of a bigger strategy that was really getting seriously effective by that point. And certainly by the summer of 2007, Al-Qaeda in Iraq had largely been smashed.
And so you do a series of raids that is devastating, and they never really came back from his death.
Today, the Joint Special Operations Command is the group of Special Forces operators that is tasked with planning and executing dangerous and secretive missions for the United States. The black ops it conducts have continued to strike at the heart of Al-Qaeda and other terror groups around the world. In 2011, it was JSOC that planned and executed the mission to take down the world's most wanted man.
Yes, I am a face artist.
Bin Laden.
You have to win. And at the end of the day, when the heat is on, you're going to do whatever it takes to win.
Story of Osama bin Laden. You need to be friendly.
Marseille, 26th of December 1994. 4 hijackers armed with machine guns, explosives and grenades hold captive 173 terrified hostages. Concealed around the airport perimeter, an elite team of special forces stands by to storm the plane. The hijackers' final ultimatum is just minutes from reaching its deadline. If their demands are not met, their deadly arsenal is enough to blow up a plane and kill everyone on board. As the siege nears the end of its final hour, one of the most savage and remarkable rescue operations in hijack history is about to unfold. Air France Flight 8969 had first been hijacked at Algiers Airport in North Africa. After a 2-day standoff, it was allowed to fly to Marseille on the south coast of France. Here, the ordeal of 171 passengers and crew on board is nearing its 54th hour. Their lives depend on a deadly battle of nerves being played out by 4 key characters. The leader of the hijackers is 25-year-old Algerian Abdul Abdullah Yaiha, an ex-greengrocer and petty criminal. Yaiha is a member of an Algerian armed Islamic group called GIA. Pitted against him is the 35-year-old highly trained French Special Forces commander, Major Favier. This is the first large-scale rescue operation he has directed. He has concealed his troops, drawn from the Gendarmerie Special Forces team, the GIGN, in the undergrowth surrounding the plane. He and they now await their greatest ever challenge. Caught in the middle of this face-off are 2 other men. Negotiator Alain Gaillard, Marseille's prefect of police, will be the only man to talk direct to the hijackers from the tower. And under the barrel of Yahiha's gun in the plane's cockpit is Captain Bernard Delem, age 51, one of Air France's most experienced pilots. He must now relay the hijackers' demands.
Bon, l'ultimatum, c'est qu'on a jusqu'à 17h. Il va falloir repartir avec le plein de carburant.
On va organiser le carburant, mais il nous faut un peu plus de temps.
Soyez patient. The hijackers' immediate ultimatum is for water and fuel to enable them to fly on to Paris, where they want to hold a press conference to broadcast their demands to the world. If their 1700 hours deadline is not met, the consequences could be disastrous.
Ils nous ont fait perdre trop de temps. Mais ils croient que nous sommes stupides. Bon, on met en route, on s'en va.
Vous voulez aller où?
Je vais te dire.
The co-pilot on board Air France Flight 8969 is Jean-Paul Borderie. As the 1700 deadline nears, he senses the hijackers' mood change.
They had been patient, and so they decided that things weren't going their way, or that they weren't being well listened to, or not well understood. And so they decided to move the plane. I felt things were going seriously wrong, and this would all finish badly.
Commandant numéro 1, commandant d'unité. L'appareil vient de démarrer ses moteurs. The GIGN forces surrounding the plane watch helplessly as it moves away from them across the airfield. Commandant numéro 1, commandant d'unité. L'appareil se déplace sur la piste.
L'avion se déplace.
The passengers and even the two hijackers at the rear of the plane are jolted by the sudden movement. Veteran flight attendant Claude Bergier calms the passengers.
Alors, le déplacement de l'avion, c'est... The movement of the plane was potentially dangerous for everyone. Everyone was frightened, and you could see the mounting tension. Neither the passengers nor the crew knew what was going on. The situation was out of control. There was no real panic, but everyone was very, very anxious and scared. So it was an incredibly difficult moment. Donc c'est vraiment très très difficile.
In the control tower, Alain Gaillard and Major Favier try to guess the hijackers' next move.
The movement of the plane may seem insignificant, but it put us in a very difficult position.
Oui, c'est fait. On doit tout recommencer à zéro.
Major Favier orders his special forces to find new cover. Tireur numéro 1, commandant d'unité. L'appareil se dirige sur la piste ouest à 32.
Continue. Je vais dire t'arrêter, ralentis pas.
The plane leaves the runway and heads for the airport terminal. The time is 16:20. No one knows what will happen next. But during the coming hour, the passengers and crew, the hijackers, and the GIGN forces will be caught in a brutal series of events that will mark them all forever. The pilots of Air France Flight 8969, with 171 passengers and crew on board, move their aircraft on the hijackers' orders.
Continue. Exact. Ouais, c'est ça.
Qu'est-ce qu'ils font? The unexpected action catches the lead negotiator and the commander of the French Special Forces by surprise. Tireur numéro 1, commandant d'unité. L'appareil se dirige sur la piste nord dans la direction de la tour de contrôle.
Il vient directement sur nous.
L'avion se trouve maintenant à 100 mètres. 90 mètres.
Ils vont se foncer dans la regard.
Je connais le capture.
Ok, arrête là. On va voir s'ils nous écoutent maintenant.
The hijacked plane parks near the air traffic control tower. L'avion est arrêté. Je répète, l'avion est à l'arrêt maintenant. It's 53 hours since the hijack began in Algiers.
Bonjour madame. Police présidentielle, on vérifie.
4 men dressed as uniformed security officials boarded the plane to inspect passports. Initially, it seemed a standard procedure. On board Flight 8969, 21-year-old Yasmina, who holds both French and Algerian passports, is traveling to Paris to visit her sister.
Papier, passeport.
They started checking passports, so they came up to me and asked me for my papers.
Vous êtes française?
Ben oui. Non, ça dépend. And I said, well, yes, no, it depends. Then he asked me, what's your name?
Quoi votre nom?
C'est écrit dessus.
Je sais pas lire.
And he looked at me and he said, I can't read.
Votre prénom?
He had my passport in his hand and he did this, which scared me a little. I told him, Yasmina.
The sudden flash of anger is the first sign that all is not as it seems. An off-duty Algerian policeman, believing the security officials to be genuine, offers to help with the passport check. Suddenly, the truth of what is happening becomes clear in a horrific way. The hijackers take the policeman to the front of the plane. With a single shot, they murder him. The security officials are hijackers who now take out the plane.
هاي المجاهدين ديال الجزائر ربي اختارنا باش نموتوا واختاركم باش تموتوا معانا ربي ان شاء الله راح يوفقنا.
They are members of the Islamist group, the GIA, a radical offshoot of the Islamic opposition in Algeria. In parliamentary elections held 2 years before, the Islamic Salvation Front had won a clear majority. But the Algerian army seized power, robbing the party of certain victory. The public protests turned violent, and the radical GIA group launched armed attacks against the military regime. The brutal civil war killed thousands of innocent civilians. The GIA also targeted foreigners living in Algeria. Air France Flight 8969 is now in the hands of 4 dangerous and committed GIA hijackers. The standoff in Algiers lasts more than 35 hours. The hijackers execute 2 more passengers. Against the unfolding horror, the Algerian authorities give in to their demand for the plane to take off for France. Back in Marseille, just half an hour until the hijackers' ultimatum runs out.
Commandant, est-ce que vous me recevez?
It's 10 minutes since the plane stopped by the control tower.
Commandant.
There's been radio silence from the Air France cockpit.
Réponds pas. Fais attendre.
Car en plus, à ces moments. What's more, in these moments of crisis, the terrorists refused to talk. I kept going. I continued to talk. The situation became more and more stressful, and as the day went on, there were moments like that, when we became more and more anxious.
On a été très inquiets.
In the cabin, where the hijackers control the passengers' every move, Yasmina has her own strategy for survival.
I never asked anything. I never asked questions. It's true that there were lots of people asking, when are we going to eat? Can we go to the bathroom? I asked for nothing. I removed myself and waited for it all to be over.
Major Fabier's special forces scrambled to secure new vantage points to monitor the Air France jet.
Commandant de l'unité à groupe d'intervention. Équipe tireur, quand vous serez réarticulé sur le nouvel emplacement, veuillez me le signaler.
They needed a position where they can see, but not be seen by the hijackers. Finally, they find a perfect hidden observation point on the roof of the terminal.
I remember that both the captain and I knew that things had taken a turn for the worse, that the tension was mounting, and that they were capable of executing someone. We knew what they were capable of.
Negotiator Alain Gaillard calls the captain continuously.
Commandant, est-ce que vous me recevez?
Et puis j'ai essayé de continuer à parler. I tried to keep talking, and they said virtually nothing. I tried to keep it going, but you knew it. Moving the plane directly in front of the control tower was a message to say, okay, we're going to finish this.
Je veux dire, on va en finir.
Commandant de préfet adjoint, est-ce que vous me recevez? Commandant, est-ce que vous pouvez me répondre?
With still no word from the cockpit, Gaillard's fears are hardening.
Commandant de préfet
adjoint. Pour être tout à fait honnête,
to be completely honest, I and the others were absolutely sure that we would see the front door open, hear a shot.
Et l'avant-gauche, pardon, s'ouvrir.
And see the body of a passenger fall to the ground.
Un passager tombé.
Now, with less than 20 minutes to go to the deadline, Major Fabier's snipers once more have the plane under tight surveillance.
Commandant, est-ce que vous me recevez?
1700 hours is approaching with frightening speed. And Major Fabier has hard evidence that the passengers and crew are in mortal danger. Earlier in the day, the hijackers released some elderly hostages. They gave Fabier the chilling news the hijackers had placed explosives in different sections of the cabin.
They would come often to see us, to talk to the women, and they'd ask tons of questions. What they did for a living, why they were doing what they were doing, what they intended on doing, why they did this or that. Did they have kids? They showed us pictures of their houses, their kids. They had well-built houses. They had families of 4 children. So then they explained the big picture to us, the ending, what they really wanted to do, that they wanted to fly the plane into the Eiffel Tower.
With explosives on board, negotiator Alain Gaillard and Commander Fabier have no intention of refueling the hijacked plane or letting it fly on to Paris. Once again, Gaillard tries to engage the hijackers in dialogue, talking about finding a solution to the fuel problem. Gaillard continues to bluff the hijackers, but he knows he cannot stall forever.
Pour le carburant, il n'était pas question que nous procédions.
The request for more fuel was obviously out of the question. Clearly, things are becoming more and more complicated. I'd run out of reasons why I couldn't get them more fuel.
As the deadline approaches, the frustration of Yahia and the other hijackers mounts.
Mais ça s'enchaînait très vite, d'un seul coup.
It all happened very quickly. All of a sudden, the tension was mounting. The hijackers were well aware that they were not getting anywhere.
Bien qu'ils ne tenaient pas gain de cause sur rien.
The captain of the plane is at last allowed to break the 30-minute radio silence.
Bon, on vient de m'autoriser à vous parler pour vous dire qu'il n'y aura aucun dialogue. On attend de l'eau potable et du kérosène pour aller jusqu'à Paris. Et l'ultimatum est à 17h.
Oui, commandant. Moi, je suis prêt à livrer de l'eau potable.
Mais je voudrais quand même une explication sur le motif de la manœuvre.
Captain Delem's patience is at an end.
J'aurais besoin d'une explication. Il n'y a pas d'explication. Cette affaire dure depuis ce matin. Vous avez fait monter la pression, maintenant vous avez gagné. On en est là.
Oui, commandant, de brief adjoint. Message bien reçu.
The 171 hostages wait, fearful that any moment might be their last. 8 minutes to go. There's no sign of rescue. After more than 53 hours in the plane, Yasmina prepares for her death.
I thought of many things. I wrote a letter to my parents, finished it, folded it up and sealed it with Scotch tape, and then hid it under my seat, telling myself that whatever happened, it might be found.
Un instant. Attendez, je vous prie.
The negotiators try to win a little more time by delivering drinking water to the plane.
C'est bon. Envoyez le camion de ravitaillement d'eau potable. Envoyez l'eau potable maintenant. Vous allez voir, commandant. Ce n'est pas des rigolades.
The hijackers move to the doors to watch the water being delivered. Tension mounts as the 1700 hours deadline looms closer.
On attend une réponse. On a besoin de carburant pour aller à Paris. Il n'y a que ça qui compte pour eux. Ils nous ont juré sur Allah qu'une fois à Paris, tout le monde sera libéré.
The captain had managed to speak to someone in the control tower, and he explained they're very determined. Something's going to happen, and it won't be good. That's it.
Voilà.
To use their own words, during negotiations, they had referred to themselves as soldiers of God. They're warriors. When they shoot to kill. They also have hand grenades. This shows you're dealing with very determined people.
The French and international press stand by, their cameras poised.
Dites-leur qu'il nous reste plus de temps. Bon, j'ai un message à vous transmettre. Il ne reste plus que 7 minutes. Je pense que vous savez lire l'heure aussi bien que nous. J'espère que tout le monde est prêt. Vous êtes à vos caméras?
Oui, commandant. Message bien reçu.
Major Favier orders his men to take up action positions, ready to attack.
Commandant de l'unité à groupe d'intervention. Échéance de l'ultimatum dans 7 minutes. Tenez-vous prêt à vous engager sur plan d'urgence.
In the cockpit, the hijackers reinforce the threat.
Bon, j'ai un message à vous transmettre. C'était que l'eau potable est terminée. Si dans les 5 minutes on ne doit pas approcher les camions de carburant près de l'avion, il va y avoir une action.
Hi.
The commandos stand by to storm the plane. At one point, a hijacker begins to recite the verses of death from the Quran. Flight attendant Claude Bergnier is deeply moved.
It was haunting. It was really lovely, beautiful music. But then the passengers told us that what we were hearing were verses of prayers for the dead. And I found that a lot less beautiful. It was terrifying. The specter of death was all around, even though I tried to ignore it.
Throughout the day, Commander Favier and his special forces plan their attack. They know that success or failure will be measured in lives saved or lost. Favier plans a simultaneous attack at the rear and front of the plane. He would have preferred to wait for nightfall and launch the operation under the cover of darkness, but there may now be no choice. 3 teams of commandos will approach the plane using air stairs. 2 units will attack through the rear doors of the aircraft and neutralize any hijackers at the back. Once inside, they report that 2 are at the back. They report that 2 are at the back. 1 has put on an Air France uniform. The other 2, one of them Yahia, are in the cockpit.
The level of anxiety, of tension, had gone way up since the plane had moved. We could see that they didn't know exactly what to do to be taken seriously, how to put more pressure on the negotiators. We could see the moment was coming where they would execute someone else. That was going to happen. There was no question about it. That was the plan.
The deadline passes. Guérin and Favier wait. Nothing. Just silence. For an instant, they could breathe a sigh of relief. Have they called the hijackers' bluff? Or is this just a momentary pause? Either way, they know they must prepare for action. Yahia and the hijackers consider killing another hostage. They decide against it. It's now 8 minutes since the deadline expired. Yahia's patience snaps. Co-pilot Jean-Paul Baudelaire is told to get out of the way.
Toma ta place.
Weekend. Bye. Have a lovely weekend. Thank you for joining. Hope you learned something.